Was I wrong to kick my cousin out after she criticized my parenting in my own home? I, 32 female, am a single mom to my son, Eli, 7 male. I've been raising him on my own since his dad moved overseas for work when Eli was 3. It's been a journey between juggling my HR job, keeping the house running, and trying to be both the fun parent and the responsible parent. I've learned to choose my battles. I have a routine that works for us. It's not perfect, but it keeps our little ship afloat. My cousin, Jess, is and always has been a firecracker. We grew up almost like sisters, sleepovers at our grandma's, matching outfits our moms thought were adorable, inside jokes that could send us into hysterics at family dinners. She's always been bold, opinionated, and quick to tell people exactly what she thinks, whether they want to hear it or not. In our 20s, we drifted a bit. I was in full mom mode. Diaper bags, pediatrician visits, budgeting for preschool tuition. Jess was off living her best free-spirited life, teaching English in Vietnam, backpacking through South America, dating a Brazilian surf instructor for 6 months just because he made the best caipirinhas. We still kept in touch, birthday texts, the occasional FaceTime, Christmas visits when she was in town. But our worlds were different. Still, I always thought of her as my person in the family. 2 months ago, Jess's overseas contract ended suddenly. She came back home with no apartment, no car, and barely any savings. It wasn't her fault. The school she worked for shut down unexpectedly. But it left her in a bind. I had a spare room, technically my son's playroom with a pull-out couch, and I told her she could stay a few weeks until she got back on her feet. Honestly, I thought it would be nice. Eli adores her. She's the fun cousin who'll get down on the floor and play hide-and-seek until she's sweating, who can turn a walk to the mailbox into an imaginary spy mission. And selfishly, I liked the idea of having another adult around. Someone to share a glass of wine with after Eli was asleep. Someone to make the house feel a little less quiet. For the first few days, it felt like a good decision. She made dinner one night, an incredible Thai curry from scratch. She surprised me with coffee from my favorite cafe on a random Tuesday. She even tackled the disaster zone that was my pantry. But then, the little comments started. The front door had just clicked shut behind her, and the sound was so sharp that it felt like it echoed in my chest. Eli was upstairs in his room. I could hear the faint clatter of Legos spilling out of a bin. He had no idea that 15 minutes earlier, I'd told his beloved cousin Jess to pack her bags and leave. Or maybe he did. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. I stayed frozen in the kitchen, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, the other still clutching the damp dish towel I'd been holding when it all went down. My palms were clammy, my throat was dry. That post-adrenaline buzz was already fading, leaving me feeling both wired and exhausted at the same time. Her coffee mug was still sitting on the counter, white ceramic with a little crack near the handle, half filled with lukewarm coffee. There was a perfect lipstick mark on the rim. I stared at it for a solid 30 seconds, like it might start talking to me. Because here's the thing. I'd been the one to invite her here. I'd told her this was a safe place to land. I'd made the bed in the spare room myself, tucked in the sheets tight, fluffed the pillows, even set a little basket of toiletries on the dresser. And now, I'd just kicked her out into the cold, mid-December air. Part of me wanted to rewind 10 minutes and say something different. Part of me wanted to run after her and say, "Wait, I didn't mean it like that. Stay, let's talk." But the bigger part of me, the one that had been quietly absorbing jab after jab for weeks, knew I meant exactly what I said. And yet, it wasn't just about today. It wasn't just about what she said. It was about every single moment leading up to it. Every little suggestion that didn't feel like a suggestion. Every time I swallowed my irritation because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. Every sideways comment that chipped away at my confidence as a mom. It had all been simmering under the surface, and today, it boiled over. Jess and I have been orbiting each other since we were kids, close enough to be part of each other's daily lives, but different enough that we each filled a role the other didn't. She's 3 years younger than me, but when we were little, that gap barely registered. We were the cousins at every family gathering. We'd sit together at the kids' table, swapping the foods we didn't like. I'd give her my green beans, she'd give me her dinner roll, while our parents laughed in the next room. Summers meant running barefoot in my grandparents' backyard, climbing the old maple tree, and making secret clubhouses out of bed sheets in the garage. Jess was always the one to suggest something just enough dangerous to make my heart race. Climbing to the roof, daring each other to jump from the swing at its highest point, sneaking a sip of Grandpa's beer when the grown-ups weren't looking. I was the cautious one, the one who thought through the consequences before acting. I'd follow her lead more often than not, but not without a nervous glance over my shoulder. As we grew older, those roles solidified. Jess was the rule breaker, the thrill seeker, the one who said what everyone else was thinking, or at least what she thought everyone was thinking. I was the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over when she pushed too far. When I had Eli, she came back from teaching in Japan to meet him. He was 3 months old, tiny and colicky and glued to me. She swept in with bright scarves and foreign candy and a booming voice that startled him into a wail. I remember her wrinkling her nose at the jarred baby food on my counter and saying, "You should just make your own. It's way healthier." I laughed it off. She wasn't here to stay, and it was easy to shrug off little comments from someone who'd be gone in a week. But this time was different. When she landed back home 2 months ago, she called me from the airport, her voice still carrying that breezy confidence she always has. "I'm basically homeless," she said, laughing like it was a punchline. She told me the school she'd been teaching at in South Korea had shut down overnight, her severance pay was a joke, and she'd spent most of her savings traveling over the summer, thinking she had job security. I didn't even think twice before offering her the room. I wanted to help. I wanted her to have a safe landing. And maybe, deep down, I wanted a piece of that old closeness back, the kind we had before our lives diverged so sharply. For the first few days, I thought maybe I'd get it. But the thing about Jess is she doesn't just bring herself when she moves in somewhere, she brings her opinions too. And she's not shy about sharing them. The first week, things felt almost easy. Jess was pitching in, and it felt good to have another adult in the house. She made a killer chicken stir-fry one night, and she and Eli built a blanket fort in the living room that took up the entire space. I remember thinking, maybe this will work. Maybe it'll even be fun. But the comments started early. On Tuesday, Eli came home from school asking for a granola bar. I tossed him one from the pantry without thinking. Jess, leaning against the counter with her coffee, said, "You know those are basically candy, right?" She popped a grape into her mouth and added, "If you want him to have energy for homework, you should give him fruit. Sugar crashes are brutal for kids." I laughed it awkwardly and said, "Yeah, but this is the snack he likes after school," and let it drop. On Thursday, Eli wanted to watch an episode of his favorite cartoon before bed. I let him. 30 minutes, no big deal. Jess plopped down on the couch next to me and said, "When I was his age, I was already reading chapter books before bed. TV is just rotting his brain." She said it with a laugh, but there was no mistaking the bite underneath. By the weekend, I'd started to notice the pattern. Food, screen time, bedtime routines, nothing was off limits for her running commentary. She even chimed in on discipline. One night, Eli was dragging his feet about brushing his teeth, so I gave him a choice. Brush your teeth now, and we can read a story, or keep stalling and go straight to bed. He brushed them, but just shook her head afterward. "You're too soft. You negotiate with him like he's your roommate. Just tell him what to do. Kids need to know who's boss." I'd smile or change the subject, but inside, the irritation was building. And it wasn't just the words, it was her delivery. That raised eyebrow, that little smirk like she'd caught me making a rookie mistake. I told myself it was temporary. She was stressed, adjusting to being back, maybe even feeling out of place. I bit my tongue, telling myself it wasn't worth creating tension over harmless comments. But tension doesn't just vanish if you ignore it. It builds. By the time that Saturday rolled around, the day everything blew up, I was already running on fumes. Eli had woken me up at 3 a.m. after a nightmare, and Jess had come in from a night out at nearly 1 a.m., clattering around in the kitchen like she was trying to wake the dead. I should have known that starting the day tired, cranky, and already on edge was a recipe for disaster. Saturday mornings started the way some arguments do, just with nothing dramatic, just a steady drip of small annoyances. Eli came downstairs, dragging his blanket behind him like a cape, hair sticking up in all directions. He looked half asleep and fully determined to be grumpy about everything. "I don't want cereal," he mumbled as he dropped into his chair. "Okay," I said, pulling the box from the cabinet anyway. "How about toast?" He shook his head. "No toast." Jess was already in the kitchen, curled over her phone at the counter, scrolling with her coffee in hand. I was still trying to shake the sleep fog out of my head and not snap at anyone. "How about eggs?" I asked Eli. He crossed his arms. "I'm not hungry." Before I could say anything else, Jess looked up and said, "Seriously, you're just letting him talk to you like that?" I ignored it. I've had enough parenting in public moments to know that not every comment deserves a response, even if it's in my own kitchen. I set a bowl of cereal in front of Eli. He took one look and pushed it away. "I said I'm not hungry." "Okay," I said, keeping my voice even. "You can take a couple of bites now and bring the rest in the car if you want." That's when Jess laughed, not kindly, but in that "here we go again" tone. "No wonder he runs circles around you," she said, shaking her head. "You don't follow through with anything. He knows if he whines, you'll give in." It felt like she just dumped a bucket of cold water over my head. My heart rate shot up instantly. "I'm not giving in," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I know what works with my kid." Jess smirked and leaned back on her stool like she was settling in for a debate. "What works? He's 7 and already talks back like a teenager. You're setting yourself up for a nightmare in a few years." And the worst part? Eli was right there, poking his spoon into the cereal, pretending not to listen, but his little ears were practically twitching. "Jess," I said tightly, "we can talk about parenting styles another time, but don't say things like that in front of him." She laughed again, louder this time. "Maybe he needs to hear it. Someone has to tell him the truth." It was like the floor gave way under me. My stomach flipped, my hands clenched into fists. That wasn't advice anymore. That was undermining me. In my own kitchen, in front of my son. And in that moment, something in me finally snapped. I set the spoon I'd been holding down on the counter, not slammed exactly, but hard enough that it made a sharp clink against the granite. "Jess," I said, my voice low but tight, "I'm serious. Enough." She leaned back on the bar stool, arms crossed like she was settling in to watch a bad reality show. "I'm just saying what everyone else is probably thinking," she said, with that infuriating half-smile that made it clear she thought she was right and I was being sensitive. That's when the pressure in my chest finally broke. "No," I snapped. "You're not just saying anything. You've been judging every single thing I do since you moved in here. Every snack, every bedtime, every choice I make as a parent. I have been biting my tongue because I wanted to help you, because I care about you, but I am done." Her smirk flattened into a frown. "Wow, so now I'm not allowed to have an opinion in your perfect little bubble?" "An opinion is fine," I shot back. "Constant criticism in my home, in front of my kid, is not fine. You don't get to undermine me and then act like you're doing me a favor." She scoffed. Actually scoffed. "Oh my God, you're being ridiculous. This is why people have trouble telling you the truth. You can't handle it." I glanced at Eli. He was sitting still in his chair, eyes darting between us like he was waiting for permission to move. The tension was thick enough to choke on. And that was it for me. I wasn't going to let him sit there and absorb this dynamic. Seeing his mom get cut down in her own kitchen like she had no authority. I took a deep breath, but my voice still shook when I said, "You need to pack your things. Today." Her eyes went wide. "You're kicking me out over this?" "Yes," I said, the word coming out steadier than I felt. "Over this and over every other little dig you've made since you got here. I can't have you here if you're going to keep treating me like I'm failing at the one thing that matters most to me. Jess stared at me for a beat too long, like she was weighing whether to escalate it. Finally, she pushed her stool back so hard it scraped the floor. "Fine," she said, "but don't expect me to come running when you realize I was right." And with that, she stalked down the hall to the guest room. The sound of her suitcase being yanked out from under the bed echoed like a gavel drop. The moment her bedroom door closed, the air in the kitchen felt heavier. I realized I was gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles were white. My hands tingled when I let go. Eli's voice was small. "Is Jess mad at you?" I crouched so I was eye level with him. "She's upset, yeah, but it's not your fault. Sometimes grown-ups disagree, and we need some space." He nodded, but his eyes flicked toward the hallway like he half expected her to come storming back. I kissed the top of his head and told him to go upstairs and finish his Lego spaceship. He didn't argue, a sure sign he wanted distance from whatever was happening. From the guest room came the unmistakable sound of drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping along the rod, the low rumble of her suitcase zipper. Every now and then, something landed with a muted thunk, like she was tossing shoes in without care. I busied myself at the sink, rinsing dishes that didn't really need rinsing, rearranging the clean cups in the cupboard, anything to avoid walking down that hall. "Where will you go?" I asked before I could stop myself. My voice came out softer than I intended, like a reflex. She shrugged without breaking stride. "I'll figure it out." Her voice was flat, no edge, which somehow felt worse than if she'd snapped. At the front door, she hesitated for half a second, long enough that I thought she might turn and say something. Maybe an insult, maybe an olive branch, maybe thank you for letting her stay as long as she did. But instead, she pulled the door open. Cold December air spilled in, sharp against my cheeks. She stepped through, dragging the suitcase over the threshold. The door closed with a quiet click that seemed to echo in the stillness. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there for a long moment, the silence pressing in on me. I felt both relieved and hollow at the same time. That night, after Eli was asleep, the house felt too quiet, not peaceful, empty. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of chamomile tea I didn't really want, my hands wrapped around it for warmth. The steam curled up toward my face and disappeared before it reached me. I kept replaying the day, frame by frame. The cereal bowl, her smirk, my voice shaking when I told her to leave, the sound of her suitcase wheels bumping over the threshold. For weeks, I'd been swallowing little moments, brushing them off, telling myself they weren't worth an argument. But now, without her here, I could feel the full weight of them. And right alongside that weight came something sharper, guilt. Jess is family. She's the cousin I used to build blanket forts with, the one who convinced me to jump into the lake fully clothed when we were 11, the one who once mailed me a care package from Japan with origami cranes and my favorite candy because she thought I sounded lonely on the phone. And yet, I'd kicked her out without giving her a second chance to adjust, without sitting her down and saying, "Here's what I need from you if this is going to work." I wondered if I'd been too quick to draw the line because I've never been good at conflict. I let things pile up until they get too heavy to carry, and then I drop them all at once. Maybe this was me dropping everything at her feet, unfiltered and final. I thought about texting her. Just a short, "Let me know you're okay," or "We can talk later." I even unlocked my phone twice, typed the words, stared at them, but each time I pictured her leaning back on that bar stool, laughing at me in front of my son. My thumb hovered, then hit delete. By the time I went upstairs, Eli was sleeping soundly, his Lego spaceship parked on the nightstand. I stood there for a moment, watching him breathe, and I thought, if protecting this piece meant asking her to leave, maybe I did the right thing. But when I got into bed, the guilt settled over me like a heavy blanket. I kept hearing the sound of the door clicking shut. And in the dark, I couldn't tell if I felt strong or just mean.
It's been a full week since Jess left. No texts, no calls, no sign of her online, which is unusual because Jess usually posts everything from her coffee order to her morning walk. It's like she's gone completely off the grid, at least to me. Eli has asked about her twice. Both times I gave him the same careful answer. She's taking some time for herself. He didn't push, but I could see the questions flicker in his eyes. The thing is, I can breathe easier now. I make snacks without bracing for commentary. I let Eli watch his cartoons without feeling like I'm being graded. There's no tension buzzing under my skin every time I walk into the kitchen. But the quiet also makes the guilt louder. I keep thinking about that basket of toiletries I set up for her when she moved in, how I told her, "Make yourself at home." And then I think about the way she paused at the door before leaving, like she was waiting for me to say something, anything to stop her. I could have handled it differently. I could have told her straight up, "I appreciate your help, but the way you talk about my parenting feels critical and hurtful, especially in front of Eli. If you can't respect that, this living arrangement won't work." Instead, I let my frustration build until it boiled over. And once the words "pack your things" left my mouth, there was no taking them back. Part of me feels like I was protecting my son, not just from hearing his mom criticized, but from the slow erosion of my confidence as a parent. Another part of me wonders if I was just protecting my ego. I don't know if she'll reach out. I don't know if I should. So here I am, strangers of the internet. Was I wrong to kick my cousin out after she criticized my parenting in my own home? Was it justified? Or did I let my emotions get the best of me? Am I overreacting?